Okay, let's dive right in. Today's explainer is tackling something that is incredibly urgent and honestly a very difficult topic. We're looking at the absolute necessity of protecting vulnerable children from a deeply rooted form of exploitation. We're going straight to the source material to break down the harsh realities of a practice known as Bacha Bazi. But more importantly, and this is really the core focus of our time today, we are going to examine what Islamic teachings actually say about this and how communities can take tangible, actionable steps to stop it for good.
So, you might be wondering, how on earth can a practice that is so deeply immoral exist in a region's claiming a faith that literally forbids it? It's a huge paradox, right? Well, today we're going to unpack that false association between the Islamic faith and this heinous cultural abuse. We'll separate the religious texts from the cultural deviations and really shed some light on the truth.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll quickly cover 1. The reality of Bacha Bazi. 2. Culture versus religion. 3. Islam's demand for protection. 4. Why the practice persists. And finally, number 5. How to stop the abuse. Let's get started.
Part 1. The reality of Bacha Bazi and uncovering this exploitation.
We really have to start by setting the record straight and acknowledging the incredibly harsh realities that these vulnerable kids face. So, Bacha Bazi translates to boy play in Persian. The source material outlines this as a deeply immoral, completely illegal practice found in parts of Central and South Asia, particularly in Afghanistan, and it is crucial to understand that these young boys are almost always coming from deeply impoverished backgrounds. They're coerced into this lifestyle, forced to dance for entertainment, and they endure severe abuse. Make no mistake, this is exploitation, pure and simple, and it's often hidden away under this completely false guise of tradition.
Moving to Part 2, Culture versus Religion. It's time to dismantle some major misconceptions.
Look, because Bacha Bazi happens in Muslim-majority regions, people often naturally but mistakenly associate it with Islamic culture. It's an assumption totally driven by ignorance. The reality is vastly different. The source material clarifies that this practice is a cultural deviation. It is an act that Islam absolutely, categorically condemns. The assumption that this is somehow religiously sanctioned couldn't be further from the truth.
Which brings us to Part 3. Islam's demand for protection, or what we can call the scriptural anchor.
The source points directly to the Quran for this, specifically Surah Al-Isra, verse 32, which states, "And do not approach unlawful sexual intercourse. Indeed, it is ever an immorality and is evil as a way." This establishes a firm, undeniable theological baseline. According to these teachings, Islam strictly and unequivocally forbids any form of sexual exploitation or abuse. There's just no gray area here.
And building on that, the source highlights a really powerful hadith, a recorded saying from the Prophet Muhammad. He said, "The Muslim is the one from whose tongue and hands the people are safe." Think about what that means. It reinforces this core principle that every single human being, completely regardless of their age, gender, or status, is meant to be honored and protected. The teachings leave literally no room for the kind of oppression and harm that defines Bacha Bazi.
Okay, Part 4. Why does it persist? Let's identify the root causes.
So if we've established this strict religious prohibition outlined in the source, we have to ask the obvious question, right? Why does this oppression keep happening? Well, the answer isn't in the scripture. It's in societal failure. The source identifies the true drivers here. We're talking about centuries of cultural corruption, severe, crushing poverty, extreme power imbalances, widespread ignorance, and just blatant exploitation by those in authority. Bacha Bazi is fueled by societal breakdowns and the powerful exploiting the weak. It survives in the shadows of poverty and is completely detached from the actual religious ideals of the region. And honestly, the source material fundamentally redefines what power even is. It shares another hadith from the Prophet Muhammad. The strong is not the one who overcomes others by his strength, but the strong is the one who controls himself while in anger. This creates such a sharp contrast. The cowardly exploitation committed by those in authority is the exact opposite of the Islamic definition of strength. True strength is deeply rooted in self-control and upholding justice for the vulnerable. Which leads us perfectly into Part 5, how to stop the abuse and building a framework for collective action.
This is the most crucial, urgent part of our explainer today. How do we actually stop this? The source material lays out a really clear, 3-step framework derived directly from the teachings we just discussed. Step 1, speak out against the practice. Step 2, educate ourselves and others. And Step 3, support efforts to uplift the vulnerable. Let's break these down to see how this collective action actually works in the real world.
All right, Step 1 is speaking out.
The source quotes the Quran, Surah Ali Imran, verse 110, "You are the best nation produced for mankind. You enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong and believe in Allah." The underlying message here, silence simply allows evil to grow. Speaking out against a horrific injustice like Bacha Bazi isn't just a polite suggestion. It's framed as an absolute religious obligation to actively forbid what is wrong.
Then there's step 2, education. And we aren't just talking about reading books. True Islamic education emphasizes human dignity, justice, and compassion. Because harmful practices are almost always the product of widespread ignorance, replacing that ignorance with an education centered on basic human rights is essential. That is the key to driving long-term systemic cultural change and totally eradicating the environment where Bacha Bazi thrives.
Finally, step 3 is where the rubber really meets the road. It requires tangible support. Backing charities, supporting grassroots organizations, empowering the oppressed, and raising community awareness. If we want to eradicate Bacha Bazi, we have to attack its root causes, namely poverty and extreme power imbalances. The source stresses that individuals and organizations absolutely must collectively invest their time and their resources into protecting those who are most at risk of exploitation.
As we near the end of our explainer today, I want you to consider this profound quote. The Prophet Muhammad said, "He is not one of us who does not show mercy to our young ones and respect to our elders." Just pause and imagine the kind of world that actually envisions. A world where mercy is the absolute baseline, where every child feels entirely safe, valued, and cherished. According to the source, this isn't just an ideal. This is the mandatory standard of protection that Islam demands for children.
Which leaves us with this final provocative question for you to chew on. How will you take collective responsibility today to speak out, raise awareness, and protect the vulnerable in your own community? Bacha Bazi is a grave injustice. But by separating corrupt cultural practices from pure faith, we can actually start to tackle those real issues of poverty and exploitation head-on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this knowledge empowers you to step up and act as an agent of change.